Hey everyone. I'm gonna be honest. I needed to clear my head for a few hours. I thought recording this journal would be a good distraction. At least as good as any. Not that this is just some throwaway entry. I promise this is a good one. In fact, the minute Mia was done with it, she brought it over and made me read it right away. She told me I was gonna lose my mind. And folks, I was not disappointed. So buckle up and get ready to enjoy a cryptid case file from the journals of Norman Carter. April 25th, 1977. It's been a busy night. I got a call this afternoon from an old buddy, Ray, up in Dover. One of his kids came home from school talking about a monster sighting. He knows about my line of work and thought it sounded promising, so he called me right up. His daughter was willing to talk, and it was only an hour drive, so I told him I'd be over straight away. Judy was upset, of course. Senior prom's coming up, and I told her we'd go dress shopping today, but she could wait a few days, especially if this lead panned out. She was not happy to hear that. It's probably for the best if this keeps me busy for a few days anyway. The girl's 18 now, she's more than capable of taking care of herself, and hopefully a few days will be enough for her to cool down and speak to me again. As soon as we were done arguing, I left the house, and soon enough I was in Dover. I met Ray at his house. He introduced me to his daughter, Susan. She's in high school too, around Judy's age. Today was their first day back from spring break. One of her classmates, Bill Bartlett, told the class about an encounter he had over vacation. She said he was pretty nervous at first, but after some prodding from the teacher, he told his story. Last Thursday, the 21st, he had been driving down Farm Street with two friends when he saw something climbing a rock wall. I didn't get the friends' names, but they didn't see anything. He described it as sort of like a hairless monkey, long and spindly with a big head and glowing eyes. No mouth, no nose, peach-colored skin. Its fingers molded to the rocks as it crawled around. Bartlett was scared, so he sped off and asked his friends if they'd seen it as well. They hadn't, and they wanted him to turn around and drive back to the scene. He didn't want to, but they finally convinced him. Whatever he had seen was gone by the time they returned. Now, according to Susan, Bill wasn't the type to tell tales or play pranks, and she said he seemed dead serious about all this. She believed him. She also heard some secondhand gossip that this wasn't the only sighting. Rumors move fast in high school. Supposedly another boy saw the same thing on that same night, walking down the road, and a younger girl saw it the night after. It wasn't much to go on, but I've put in more work for less credible sightings before. So now I'm in the woods around Dover. I made camp and just finished dinner. I'll probably look around for a few more hours until I call it a night. No idea what this thing could be, if there really is a creature here, but I guess we'll find out. April 26th. Something is in these woods, no doubt about it. No tracks, but I picked it up with my sixth sense on and off. I spent most of the day going in circles trying to hone in on it. Pretty sure it's been hiding. Hopefully it'll come out once the sun goes down. April 27th. I just had one hell of a night. It's almost 7 a.m. now, and I've got a creature sleeping in my tent. Suffice to say, that's about the last thing I would have expected. Last night, I went back out at dusk like I had planned. This time it was much easier to track with my sixth sense. The creature was giving off signals like crazy. But the weird part was, it was unintelligible in a way I had never encountered before. I don't just mean it was something that couldn't talk. Even the average animal has relatable thoughts and feelings. Structured, you could say. But all I was getting from this one was a big, jumbled up mess, like filling my head with static. The underlying impression I got was confusion. Anyway, thanks to that, I found it almost immediately. And this thing matched up with Bartlett's description pretty well. Its eyes didn't glow, but they reflected light well enough. Although it did have a mouth. Not that I realized that until later. It had no lips, so you practically couldn't see the mouth until it was open. The creature may have been easy to find, but it was hard to approach. This thing was skittish as all get out. Most of the time, gaining an animal's trust isn't that hard. With enough patience, the right body language will do the trick, or failing that, my sixth sense can do it. Here, I needed both, and it still took me the better part of the night to gain the creature's trust. Once I did, though, it was like a switch had flipped. I finally saw its mouth open, and it started to make an odd, almost pained, humming sound. It wobbled towards me with unsteady legs, like a baby deer or a newborn foal. Then it lunged. I was worried it was going to attack, but I kept my cool, and it wrapped its arms around me. It was hugging me. I realized the strange humming sounds were actually cries. It was crying. And that's when it hit me. This thing was just a child. A baby. It was alone, scared and confused, and just wanted to be comforted. It was unintelligent because it was so young. All it had to go on were primal instincts. I returned its hug and patted it on the back. Eventually, I picked the creature up, and as it wrapped its arms around my neck, I did my best to rock it gently. It wasn't too awkward to hold. Despite being about the size of a grade schooler, it was light as a bird. I once again tried calming it with my sixth sense, this time as softly as I could. The crying finally stopped. I decided to bring the creature back to camp while I determined the next course of action. Along the way, I started humming an old nursery rhyme Judy had liked, and at some point it finally fell asleep. As the sun rose, I laid the sleeping thing down in my tent and got it as comfortable as I could. No idea what I'm gonna do now. April 27th. It's just after midnight, but I need to write all this down before bed. The creature, the infant, slept like a brick for most of the day. Just after sundown, I finally heard it stirring again. As it made a few of those whimpering, humming sounds, I brought it out of the tent to sit with me by the fire. It was entranced. I'm not sure how long we sat there, but the peace was finally broken by the appearance of 3 cloaked figures. I thought they were kids at first. The tallest was no more than 5 feet. That only lasted a second, as I realized 2 things. 1, they were completely covered from head to toe. And 2, no kid would be able to sneak up on me as silently as these 3 just had. I was taken aback, but I asked who they were and what they wanted. They were silent for a moment before one took out a device from somewhere within its robes. It was metallic, about the shape and size of a wallet, and featureless as far as I could tell. The figure began poking at it. A second later, it started talking. Their mouths didn't move, and I realized the sounds were coming from the metallic box. Must have had miniaturized speakers inside. And the voice didn't sound quite right. It was stilted, emphasis on the wrong places, and there was just a little bit of the same hum that the creature made. I could tell it was some kind of robot voice. The artificial voice stated that they were here to collect the specimen, and that's when one of the figures motioned to the creature in my lap. I asked if they were his parents. They said yes and no. I asked what they meant, how that could be possible. The artificial voice box spoke again, explaining that this creature was created by them, but it was an experiment and nothing more. It had escaped, and they had been unable to capture it. I'm not gonna lie, I got mad at this point. Explained to them that this thing was only an infant, scared and helpless. I told them I would refuse to give the creature over to them if he wasn't going to be cared for. The three figures looked back and forth at each other. I was half expecting them to take out a ray gun and shoot me on the spot. They were silent, but as they moved their arms and heads, I could tell that they were communicating. I reached out with my sixth sense, but they were blank slates. However they talked, it wasn't something I could pick up. Finally, the individual in the middle lowered its hood to reveal its face. They were honest-to-God space aliens. Kind you always see in witness sketches from people who say they've been abducted. Big head, big eyes, tiny mouth. They were far enough from the fire that it was hard to make out much more detail, but the resemblance was unmistakable. I knew that by revealing themselves, they were showing me a sign of trust. Then through the voice box, they said the creature would come to no harm. I gave him one final hug and carried him over to the aliens. They thanked me and asked me how I had gained the creature's trust and tracked him down when they had been unable to. A fair question, considering all the technology they must have at their disposal. I explained my powers and how I used them to find the creature and calm it down. I could tell they were immediately intrigued. The voice box said that they were not aware humans could do that. They once again talked silently among themselves for a moment. I asked them to elaborate, but they left without another word, just as quickly and quietly as they had appeared. I assumed they went back to a spaceship, but I didn't see any strange lights or anything in the sky. Once they were gone, I sat by the fire for a few hours before finally writing all this down. I don't know if I did the right thing. April 30th. Visited Ray again today to thank him for the tip. Apparently word had spread about the sightings. Folks are even coming in to investigate. After I left Ray's, I stopped for gas and ran into a face that looked familiar. I realized it was one of the researchers, Lauren. Ran into him in Enfield a few years back. He was so excited I didn't have the heart to tell him the case was already over. So, yeah, aliens. Gray aliens. The real thing. Just like the one we met in the exosuit. The original Flatwoods monster was in the 50s, so if they've been visiting Earth for this long, I'm not totally surprised Norman eventually ran into them. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. First things first. The creature Norman found in the woods has come to be known as the Dover Demon. I was hoping that'd be the case as soon as he mentioned Dover, which is in Massachusetts, by the way. I've always had a soft spot for this one because it happened so close to where we grew up and was definitely the most exciting cryptid from the area. But even outside of New England, the Dover Demon is definitely one of the more well-known cryptids, especially among the unique sightings. I mean, obviously, pretty much all cryptids are unique, but I meant like the ones that are known from only a single encounter, like the Flatwoods Monster, or the Hopkinsville Goblins. Now, prior to this, I had seen plenty of theories, from flat-out hoax to animal misidentifications, which themselves ranged from escaped pet gibbons all the way to newborn moose calves, and even a creature from Cree folklore called the Managishi. With its big head and little body, some did theorize that it was connected to Greys in some way, but obviously there was never anything concrete. And yeah, Norman's sketch is pretty close to the two famous eyewitness sketches. Oh, and fun fact, speaking of, the very first witness, William Bartlett, who did one of those sketches, He's actually a really accomplished oil painter now, so good for him. But yeah, humanoid shape, 2 arms, 2 legs, really thin with a big head, and its hands and feet seem pretty similar with long, thin fingers and toes. Digits? Let's just call them digits. Long, thin digits. Okay, but back to the most important thing, the Greys. Obviously, Mia always disagreed with me about aliens until we found the one in the exosuit, but if it hadn't been for that, I think this one would have been enough to finally convince her. The most interesting thing is the way they communicated. It seemed like they were using some kind of ESP, but Norman couldn't sense them, and they needed some kind of text-to-speech device to talk to him. Maybe they're on, I don't know, some kind of different brainwave length, and they hadn't figured out how to tap into the human one yet, but who knows. Knowing aliens were involved just leaves us with more questions. If the Dover demon was an experiment, what were they testing? Was it some kind of genetic engineering? It does look similar to the Greys, but it's not exactly the same. And whatever happened to it? Were there more experiments? And what about alien abductions? Cattle mutilations? Sorry, I'm getting carried away. I could sit here thinking about it all day. And side note, it seems that Norman once again ran into Lauren Coleman. I wasn't totally sure it was him last time he brought it up, but now I'm positive. Coleman was on the scene only a few days after Norman, and he was basically the lead researcher all throughout the whole case. He's even the one that came up with the Dover Demon name. It's a real shame he missed everything, but that is what it is. Just checking my notes real quick. Okay, that was a doozy, but I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about. So, hope you enjoyed, and see you later.
The Cryptid Cases has been a production of Little Giant Monsters. Find out more about us at littlegiantmonsters.com and by searching for Little Giant Monsters on social media. Every Monday after a new episode, we share a cryptid sketch, so be sure to look out for that. If you're enjoying the Cryptid Cases and want to help support us, find us on Patreon. Rewards include behind-the-scenes content, early access to episodes, and access to our Discord. A huge thanks to all our current patrons. Links to our Patreon, our merch, and other shows we're creating are all available on our website or in the description of this episode. Another way to support our work is through ratings and comments on Apple Podcasts and other podcast apps. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.